framework. And we also want to be clear that these can be used beyond CI3T frameworks as well. Like they can be used in other tiered systems, they can be used in families, they can be used in residential facilities, they can be used in online learning environments. So there's a plethora of ways that we can do this, and we are grateful for the time and looking forward to you being here. And as you know, everybody that's here is in this process of working with us thanks to the generosity of the Institute for Education Sciences. And they have given us this money to afford the design, the implementation, and the evaluation of these enhanced professional learning materials. And some of you on this call are part of a randomized control trial. So the schools that are in Washington and South Carolina, in their district, half of the schools are getting access to traditional materials, and the other half are getting access to these enhanced materials. The other schools that are here tonight from the 3 districts in Kansas and the district in Vermont, they are part of a longitudinal descriptive study, so they can share these materials widely. And I'm telling you this because you might meet people and think, gosh, why aren't they sharing these resources more broadly in their districts? It's because they have been asked not to share. So we appreciate people holding the sanctity of the design close for us. But as we're here tonight, getting a chance to share these resources, we are excited to talk to you about 2 specific low intensity supports, but we want to connect you more broadly with some others as well. So where we are tonight is focusing on these low intensity supports. And these are things that can be done and we want you to do as part of Tier 1 practices. We're also going to talk about how these can be dedicated standalone Tier 2 supports, and they often are pieces of other Tier 2 or Tier 3 support. So I think there's great utility in what you're doing tonight. So if you would take just a moment, please, to get situated and do 2 things. Please log into this website. And if you would go to this session 3, because I'd like you to have this presentation that we are going to enjoy with you tonight. And we're also going to be tapping into some modules that are there. So first thing is go to session 3. And if you go to that enhanced page, the login's right there for you. Go all the way to the bottom. You're going to find that navy blue bar at the bottom and find session 3. And then the second thing, if you would open up your own CI3T manual for your school. So go ahead and pull that up if you would. And tonight, what we're going to do is we want to have a quick conversation to situate where these fit within your model. And we're going to spend our time tonight on 2 strategies. And we start with behavior-specific praise because that is the linchpin. If you can teach all the adults in your building how to deliver that behavior-specific praise, the value of that is the fact that that is the active ingredient in shaping all behaviors. It's like giving kids acknowledgement for their improvements in reading, or using the new skills that you're teaching as part of your second step, or your harmony, or your connect with kids types lessons. And then we're also going to talk about choice, specifically instructional choice, and how we can weave that through the various stages of instruction, and we can use it in other areas, like in non-instructional areas. So we're excited to share those with you. And then we're going to give you a time to explore some other options. So again, and for those of you who are just joining us, you are going to find session 3 and you're going to download that PowerPoint. And as you're thinking about this work that you're doing, again, we just want to sincerely applaud you, recognizing that CI3T is not just about behavior. It is not just about well-being. It is not just about academics. It is literally one complex integrated system that is intended to meet kids' multiple needs. And we think it holds particular benefit for all of us right now as we navigate through this pandemic era, because even pre-pandemic, we know that if you were to take a picture of the United States of America, you would find in that picture that you've got about 12% of all kindergarten through 12th grade kids that have some type of moderate to severe behavior challenge of early childhood. So like the 2 major disorders of childhood are internalizing issues like shy, anxious, and withdrawn. And then the other is that of acting out, non-compliant, disruptive. And I think all of us know how to very easily find the kids with externalizing behavior patterns. We often say the good news is they're never sick. They're at school all the time. They suit up. They show up every single day. But the kids often that are more challenging to detect are kids with internalizing issues. And every single person on this call is in a district that is using the student risk screening scale, that it takes about 15 minutes of teacher time in fall, in winter, and spring to look for kids in your building that might have slightly higher than average internalizing or externalizing. And on this call, we have partners that are also part of other grants that are specifically focusing on tier 2 interventions to support those kids in need. But the good news is that the strategies that we're talking about right now hold particular benefit for kids that have these challenges. And that's good because people are anticipating. The National Association of School Psychologists is predicting that as we navigate through the pandemic era, that you can expect those numbers to come close to tripling. And so a lot of people back in the day felt that kids that had behavior challenges were going to be supported by special education services. That is simply not the case. It's less than 1% of all school-age kids that go on to receive that support for emotional disturbances within special education services. And the strategies that we're sharing with you today have been synthesized by many research members on our team. Paloma Perez-Clark, who's on this call, just had one of her very first systematic reviews come out, looking at a synthesis of second step as like part of a tier 1 component. On this call, we also have Eric Common, who has led systematic reviews on things like opportunities to respond and high probability requests. David Royer, who's a member of our team, has done multiple systematic reviews of behavior-specific praise and instructional choices. And the short story is, we have taken the time to synthesize what has enough evidence to suggest that at a minimum, it is a promising practice. Because as teachers, we don't have time to do things that are super time consuming and that don't have a lot of evidence to suggest that if I do this, this is going to work. So we are thankful not only for these research syntheses, but we've also had an opportunity, like Wendy and I have worked with teachers literally from coast to coast, some of them who were former master students, some of whom are in-service teachers, where they have actually tested out these strategies in real classrooms, have contributed to the literature, and we'd be happy to send you some articles about people that are doing those with very limited university support. But today we are here with you, either for people that are from the schools participating in the Exploring Enhanced Resources or those that are in the randomized control trial, to show you how we have hopefully gone to this 2.0 version. And when you look at the steps that we're going to talk about today, the entire intent is to make sure that you have consistency. So if you are a classroom teacher that is going to go do this, if you are a counselor that's going to go do this, if you are an instructional coach, or if you are a principal leader or a team member, our goal is to make sure that we can give you a list of resources about what these strategies are, how to do them, the benefits, the challenges, a little bit about the evidence behind them, but most importantly, the steps for being able to do them. So tonight's conversations are going to be focusing on how could I do this in an actual classroom, and how can I empower other people to learn how to do these. So when we think about these strategies that we're talking about, in the perfect world, these would be a hallmark feature of your tier 1 practices. So when you look in the pages of your CI3T implementation manuals, and if you have one of those with you now, please open it up. And when you start to look past the mission, past the vision, you're going to start to see these clarities that you have created during your building year. You're going to have this listing of what you say are faculty roles and responsibilities for academics, for behavior, and for social emotional well-being. And these strategies that we're talking about tonight, you will notice in your plan that they are listed in the academic column. And the reason for this is we want to make this clear that this is not something you do separate from instruction. This is something you do part of instruction as part of regular school practices for every single kid, so that they're getting these high rates of behavior specific praise. So they're getting choices built into their days. In addition to that, in addition to teaching expectations, and in addition to having those expectations posted in your building, I want to be clear that although those are listed in the behavioral column, those too are part of that integrated experience at tier 1, because those are the things that your faculty and staff, when you administered that survey on school-wide expectations survey for specific settings, that's what your faculty and staff said to you. This is what we really feel like kids need to know to do well in our classrooms, in our hallways, in cafeterias, and other non-instructional areas. And so when you look at these types of strategies, these are going to be used to help kids meet the expectations that are posted in every key setting in your building. And our goal is to make sure that every adult that's interacting with kids knows what these are and how to do them. And when we think about also empowering the adults to respond respectfully when challenging behaviors happen, those same low intensity supports are the building blocks of how we respond respectfully. And timing is everything. Like, we know that if we were to offer kids choices when they're escalating, that is the wrong time to offer them choices. That's more likely to escalate than to de-escalate. So the first thing is to build the base and build the knowledge foundation for these strategies. And then the second thing is to help people get really good at the timing, because we want them to know how to show empathy, how to maintain the flow of instruction, how to acknowledge other kids that are meeting expectations, and then go back and quickly redirect and reteach. And then as soon as that kid's back on task, then we want to give them, again, sincere, immediate feedback that they're on the right track. And finally, each person here has adopted at Tier 1 a validated program that you're literally teaching, just like we teach everything else, so that you're making sure that you're teaching these kids specific skills like how to be empathetic towards others, how to resolve, how to resolve conflict, and how to make their needs known, advocate for themselves. And when we talk about doing all this well in CI3T, we're talking about putting this all together. And as we've said many times, we want to first change the experience for the adults so that they in turn can experience change, create the change for kids. So part of that, as we are teaching teachers these new strategies, and for some, it's like a refresher to say, I do remember learning that, or that is a practice that I'm doing. And maybe it's like putting some new words and new labels or refining the steps for things that are already in place. We want to make sure that we're acknowledging them for their investment in their own time, for their own professional learning, like exactly like what you're doing right now. We do want to make sure that we're recognizing people for doing that. And we want to use our data to know how to move forward in those areas. And before we start jumping into the strategies in just a moment, we'd like to situate it within this idea of an integrated lesson plan, which is something that Wendy Oakes and Mark Buckman and Katie Lane have been working on for a period of time. And we're not suggesting that you have teachers go fill on this out, but for them to think conceptually about when you teach any lesson, start by thinking three things. Like, what are you trying to accomplish academically? Like, how is that linked to your district or state standards for what you're attempting to teach? And secondly, what you're teaching when you teach those second step or harmony or positive action lessons, how can you weave those lessons learned into these applied practice opportunities with other adults and with other kids in your classroom? So this is the time where you can say things to kids like, do you remember when we were talking a little bit about how to resolve conflict with others? And what do you remember from that lesson that we talked about last week? And they might share back some of those steps. So you might say, today, when you break into your small reading groups, we're going to be talking about Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. And when we talk about these three characters that we're going to discuss today, I'd like you to be ready to talk about how some did a better job than others in using those steps to resolve conflict. So be prepared for that. And then you might also pre-correct on what's expected, like letting them know what's coming next in terms of those expectations. I'm going to be listening for you to be able to make those connections for other things that we're taught. And then I'm going to also, after I've told them these three big things, to say, here's what we're doing academically. Here's an opportunity for you to apply the great skills that you're learning. And I'm also going to remind you of what you need to know to be successful. And then those strategies, I'm going to weave through different phases of instruction. So I might build an instructional choice at the very beginning of a lesson as part of a starter activity, where I might have two journal questions on the board. And I say, just pick any one that you'd like to start with to write. Or it might be you have two questions and you say, you can do these in any order, but I'd like you to do this. And then as soon as they start meeting those expectations, we use our behavior specific praise. And ideally, that is the foundation of the integration at Tier 1. And so all the work, like right now in your buildings, your treatment integrity and social validity windows are open, meaning the adults in your buildings right now are giving you input on what they think about the goals, the procedures, and the outcomes. And they're telling you literally right now, here's how I think I'm doing in terms of how I'm teaching in this integrated fashion. Here's how I'm doing right now in terms of how I'm acknowledging kids. And here's how I'm doing using my data. And I know people, they're doing direct observations in classrooms so they can get snapshots and their coaches can go in and take a peek at that. And we want to have all that in place so that we have clarity as to what's happening at Tier 1. We can make determinations as to when it's time to start connecting kids to Tier 2 and to Tier 3 supports with our sort of reserved for the students with the most intensive intervention needs. And so tonight, these skills that we're going to talk about tonight, these are very practical strategies, and we are going to show you what these are. And then Mark and I are going to connect you to the practicalities of where you can literally go open these. You can do this in your classroom tomorrow, and you would be walking out tonight being prepared to go do a 10-minute professional learning or a 30-minute session. You can bake it into a newsletter. But as you're thinking about building your own tiered library, this is where we're starting tonight. And then when we're back the next time, we're going to focus on tier 2, then the next time tier 3, and then we're going to weave it all together. So as you're thinking about some of these resources on that same page where you found this PowerPoint slide, if you go back up, you're going to see that we're going to be making some connections to tier 1 practices. And if you look at this bank of tier 1 resources, do you see this little girl that has the purple shirt right here on this one? When you find that, think purple, and in that module, it starts to mention this library of tools that will become available to you. And I loved a conversation I had with, or no, it was last week. And in our district meeting, she's like, girl, you're going to need to step it up and get the production gun on those because we're doing one a month. And I love that about her. She stretches us and makes sure that we're, producing these, and we are on track that these will be coming available to you. But if you're thinking about these strategies, and when you walk out of here, like, what should I share first? You might share this tier 1 module for people. And then in it, it mentions the rest of these that we're going to be starting to talk about. And as I mentioned, then we're going to start getting into tier 2 and to tier 3. But for tonight, where we are starting is with these low intensity supports. And specifically, we're going to work on behavior specific praise and instructional choice. So if you are still on that page, will you scroll up, and will you put in the chat whether or not you have found these purple blocks? So behavior specific praise. This reminds me a little bit of Eric Common, back when he had a little bit more of a mustache. Thumbs up, king of the behavior specific praise. And conceptually be thinking about, you're going to focus on 2, but the goal would be to ultimately be able to do things like looking at your multiple sources of data to begin connecting kids to supports. Like if this was my class and this is from one of your actual modules, I would not be attempting, and these are fictitious kids' names, I would not be attempting to put all these kids into tier 2 and tier 3 supports. But our goal would be that in your system, you would have an opportunity to take a peek at how kids are doing with internalizing and externalizing and reading fluency. And if I have this many kids that have need beyond tier 1, I'm going to be asking myself as a teacher, what's the simplest shift I can make in how I'm providing instruction, so that I can maximize kids' engagement to this high quality professional learning that I'm providing. And so that I in turn would then know how to create this space where I can maximize the instruction that's taking place. So at this point, I'm going to pause here, and I'm going to ask you, if you would, to open up the one that says behavior specific praise. And I'm going to turn this over now to Mark Buckman, who's going to make some connections for us tonight about what this strategy is. He's going to go over some of the resources that are in there, and then he's literally going to open up a PowerPoint that is in that module. And we're going to ask you to follow along so that you know exactly where it is, because we want to build your fluency and familiarity with these resources. And as you're doing this, might be something that you do in your class, and it might be also something that you think, man, I really want to go back and help facilitate on-site coaches. So it might be like Teresa and Alicia and Glenna all think, God, we should totally do this. And we could have like 3 people in our building that are the go-to people for behavior specific praise. And they might have another 3 people who are the go-to people for another strategy. So there's lots of ways that we can get this in the hands of individuals. But right now, we're going to start at the beginning with behavior specific praise. So Mark, I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to turn it over to you.
So as Kathleen mentioned, we are going to be talking about behavior specific praise. And this section of the presentation is going to focus not just on how to do behavior specific praise, but also where you can find resources to continue to develop your learning, and also hopefully to share with your colleagues. Because part of the idea of a session like tonight is that you come and you learn a little bit about the strategy, you have some ideas for what you could do in your classroom tomorrow, but also the hope is to kind of pay it forward, because we know that everybody in your building is too busy to everybody, come to all of these kinds of sessions. But as you're learning this content, passing it to your PLC, for example, is a really powerful way to kind of scale up these strategies in your school. So I'll kind of show you some of those resources that are available as we go through the content. And then I'll conclude this section by actually just pulling up this module and giving you a brief tour so that you can make connections between some of the images, infographics, videos that we'll show you right now. So you could find those again within the context of this module on behavior specific praise. So to get jumping right into this strategy, which I'm really excited to talk about behavior specific praise because in a lot of ways, it's one of the simplest of the low intensity supports and probably one of the most effective for some reasons that I'll talk about in just a minute. So as we're getting started, let's first think about what exactly is this strategy. So behavior specific praise are statements that are positively going to acknowledge an individual for engaging in a specific desired behavior. So for example, Jonah, I really like how you got your pencil and paper out immediately after being asked. You were really prepared and on task. A very simple statement that's going to acknowledge a positive behavior. That is behavior specific praise. And also, as you all are thinking about what this would sound like in your classroom or in your school, you've already got 3 to 5 school-wide expectations. Maybe they're be ready or be respectful, be responsible, give best effort. And if those were your expectations in your school, you might start thinking about how you could find specific examples of behaviors that match those expectations that you could praise students for meeting. And that's basically going to tie together the rules and expectations that you're teaching in your school. And then you're going to use these praise statements to reinforce students' behavior for meeting those expectations. So I used a word there that I'm going to come back to in just a minute, reinforce. So just kind of tuck that away for just a second. So why should I use behavior specific praise? Praise is simple and effective, particularly when used consistently and immediately following a behavior. The reason that timing is important is that when we think about reinforcement, which is how we're going to make some behaviors happen more often, timing is critical because the more quickly that praise statement follows the behavior that we see that is positive and desired, the more that student is going to make the connection between the thing that they did and the acknowledgement that they received, which is that positive statement in there that's targeting them. So that's really important. Another reason that you want to use behavior specific praise is that it's effective as a tier 1 support. That means that it works literally for everybody potentially. There are a few caveats to that, which I'll talk about in a little bit later, but it's a great strategy to use just for all students across the school day. However, you can actually use behavior specific praise as a tier 2 support, meaning that for some kids that might need a little bit of extra support in an academic area, in a behavioral area, or in a social and emotional area, behavior specific praise that's more frequent, more intense, or more personalized is going to be one way that we can help that child be more successful. So we can take it as a tier 1 strategy and use it more often with a specific child in mind to kind of intensify it to serve in that tier 2 support type role. The other thing to think about is that behavior specific praise is going to feature prominently in almost every other tier 2 support that you might use. I'm talking academics, I'm talking behavior, and I'm talking social. The reason for that is that all of those interventions are based on teaching skills or reteaching skills. And if you want a skill or a behavior to happen more often, what do we need to do? We need to reinforce that behavior when it occurs. And behavior specific praise is one way that we can do that. So just as an example, if you've got a kid that has like check-in, check-out, so they go see a mentor before school and after school, what are those mentors talking about with those students? They're talking about behavior expectations. They're talking about things that went well, and they're providing praise for meeting expectations throughout the school day. They're using behavior specific praise. And if that student's coming to your classroom with that check-in, check-out sheet, hopefully throughout the day, we're also talking about expectations. We're also providing behavior specific praise. So it's good to know that that having this sort of tool in your toolkit is super important because it's going to provide a foundation that you can build on, even as students are receiving more intensive interventions. Because the reality is that if we have students that have tier 2 or tier 3 needs in the classroom, they need those tier 1 supports in addition to the more intensive interventions. And the scaling up of behavior specific praise is a great example of that, how we're going to use that to support those other intervention components that are in place. And that's the last piece here, is that behavior specific praise might be used as a component of a tier 3 support. So just as an example, for students that have pretty significant externalizing or sometimes internalizing behaviors, they might be receiving something like a functional behavior, a functional assessment based intervention, or some other really intensive tier 3 supports. And oftentimes that's going to include procedures to reinforce the student for meeting expectations or for doing a certain replacement behavior. And what that might look like is providing those behavior specific praise statements. So this is an essential skill that we need in our teaching toolkits. So it's definitely something that's worth our time and attention to really get a good handle on how to do this effectively. And I've mentioned the word reinforcement a couple times, and I just wanted to kind of harp on that a little bit more. So behavior specific praise is one way that we can reinforce student behavior. And as we're thinking about what reinforcement means, literally it means anything that we can do as a consequence of a behavior that's going to make that behavior happen more often. That is what reinforcement means, like literally something that causes a behavior to happen more often. So when you're thinking about a classroom that maybe is really struggling with difficulty meeting just basic behavior expectations, and we're asking ourselves, how can we help these students meet expectations more often? Part of the answer to that question, maybe not the whole answer, but part of the answer needs to be, how can we reinforce students when they are meeting expectations? And behavior specific praise is a fundamental and critical way that we can do that. So again, really important skill and definitely something that we want to lean into. Okay, so all that said, how do we actually do or plan to use behavior specific praise in sort of a planful and strategic way? So we actually have a step-by-step checklist for how to implement this strategy. You can see the steps right here, and it's very simple to use. Basically, what we're going to do is first, we're going to learn what is behavior specific praise. We're going to do a quick reflection on our own behavior to see how often am I using behavior specific praise. And you might actually look to say, how often do I use behavior specific praise versus general praise? General praise being things like, hey, great job, awesome work, that was so cool. All of those are positive and great things to say to students, but they're not really behavior specific because we're not identifying the behavior the student did to receive that praise statement. So probably not quite as effective for reinforcing those behaviors. So we want to make sure that we're thinking about, how often am I actually doing behavior specific praise now? And then the second step is going to be to identify behaviors to reinforce. The good news is you're working in schools already that are implementing CI3T. You've got school-wide behavior expectations. You've got a matrix that specifies what students need to do to be successful in every single environment in the school. Those are the behaviors that we want to reinforce. So that part's already done for you. You just have to know what those behaviors are, and by referencing your school-wide expectation matrix. Next step, practice delivering behavior specific praise. You could do that on your own or with a colleague, and we'll actually show you an activity that you could use to do that in just a moment. The fourth step is just observe student behavior. Walk around the classroom, watch kids, watch what they're doing. And when you see somebody meeting that expectation, you provide behavior specific praise, which is step 5. Step 6 is going to be to monitor delivery. This could be done by using sort of an implementation or treatment integrity checklist. So you might actually monitor how many behavior specific praise statements that I give today, just using a quick tally sheet, which is a great way to kind of self-monitor your own behavior and remind yourself to really use those praise statements more often. And the last thing is going to be to seek student input. The reason for this, and I mentioned it before, I said behavior specific praise is a great tier 1 strategy to use for all students. That is true. However, it's good to know that some students are not going to be super reinforced by receiving positive social attention from an adult. There are a couple of reasons why that might be the case. It could be embarrassing to a student to be like called out in front of peers. I think especially kind of in the more middle school, high school range, you might find students that sort of cringe away from those really over the top positive statements from teachers. It's not always true, but sometimes. So it's good to keep in mind that there is some room for individual preference for how they might want to be acknowledged. Just because a child doesn't like to receive public praise doesn't mean we shouldn't praise them or use behavior specific praise to support them, but it might mean that we're going to be a little bit more covert about praising that student's behavior, walking up to that child, getting on their level and saying, hey, I noticed the effort that you gave today during math. That was awesome. I'd love to see that again tomorrow. By doing that in sort of a covert way, we're honoring the student's preferences, and that might actually be more reinforcing for that child in the future. And while I'm kind of thinking through this very first slide here, I do just want to give an example. I was in a classroom the other day, and I just saw this amazing transition from one subject to another. And basically what happened was they were teaching their math lesson, they closed up, they were transitioning to the next subject, and she basically gave the direction, and then she just walked around the classroom and was basically narrating what kids were doing at their desks. She was like, Tommy, I can see your book's out. He's ready to go. Susie, I can see your eyes on the board. She's telling me that she's ready to go. Jill, she's helping her partner over here get on the right page. I really appreciate that. So basically, it wasn't like some artificial thing she was doing where she's stopping instruction and giving these sort of out of context praise statements. She's straight up just narrating behavior in the classroom, but doing it in a way that's acknowledging those specific behaviors. And you can literally see all the other kids in the classroom that are looking at the child that's being acknowledged, and they're mimicking that behavior. So it's so powerful for redirecting student attention, calling attention to those positive behaviors, and reinforcing individuals for meeting those expectations. Okay, so when we're thinking about what behavior specific praise looks like, it's good to know that we can contrast it with a different kind of praise statement, which is general praise. Behavior specific praise is going to actually mention literally what's the behavior that the student did that's worth acknowledging. So for example, we can do this for academic tasks. So Jesse, thanks so much for being prepared by getting your math folder out during the transition. It's kind of like what I was just saying, right? A non-example would be, great job, Jesse, right? That's a positive statement. It's a praise statement, but it doesn't exactly say what Jesse did that was great. And although students might be able to infer what they did that was great, by mentioning the specific behavior, we're helping to really kind of set grooves in the minds of students to know exactly what they can do that's going to make them successful, that might contact reinforcement. And specifically, there's sort of a side benefit here that can be hidden, which is that by mentioning the specific behavior, when you're praising one student, you're giving other students in the area the opportunity to benefit from that statement, because then they can see what the right thing to do is. And it's calling attention to that positive behavior. It's a little subtle. You're sort of redirecting students' attention without directly telling them what to do, which is kind of nice because it gives them the opportunity to get back on track without having to give attention to less than desirable behavior or by nagging students to follow expectations. It's kind of a subtle way to get them to do those behaviors. So that was an academic example. We could also do a non-academic example, such as, for example, Jesse, I love how respectful you were when you asked to use the ball. That's great. And probably a little bit more specific than a non-example, which would be how respectful of you, right? Another positive statement. It's nice, but it's not specific. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. And so we also mentioned that you could use behavior specific praise as a tier 2 or tier 3 intervention. This is an example of an intervention grid that you might find in your school's CI3T implementation manual. If you're thinking about how to use behavior specific praise as an intervention or a component of an intervention, you might look at this kind of grid to see, okay, what kinds of students might benefit from this as a support. So those might be students that have moderate or high risk in externalizing and internalizing behaviors. Perhaps behavior specific praise is not the only thing that we're going to do for those students, but it could be a very powerful part of a packaged intervention to support those students' needs. And that's, again, not just behavior. Academics, we can use behavior specific praise to improve academic skills by acknowledging behaviors that are associated with academic success. So this is appropriate for elementary school and, of course, middle and high school as well. So if you're looking for an opportunity to practice making behavior specific praise statements, one activity that's available for you in this module is like a kind of a sorting activity that you can take this piece of paper, print it out, cut it up, and you can sort statements into general and behavior specific piles. Alternatively, during a PLC or faculty and staff meeting, you could actually do this activity by handing out strips of paper that have example statements and have people go around and say them to other people and see if folks can identify whether that statement was general or behavior specific. Although it sounds a little bit rudimentary, it's actually very powerful to practice saying praise statements and get a handle for like, what does it feel like to give behavior specific praise as opposed to general praise? Because it's very common for people to use general praise and think that they're doing behavior specific praise because in their mind, they know what they're praising. But until you really get some practice doing it can feel a little artificial or clunky. So it's really nice to kind of do something like this where you're actually giving people the chance to say these words out loud. Okay, so let's see here. Some of the resources that are available to you are a comprehensive module that we're going to show you in just a minute that consists of an ebook. Basically, it's going to walk you through all the details, the what, the why, the research, and the implementation steps for using behavior-specific praise, of which I've somewhat summarized here already. But if you want to go deep, this book is a wonderful resource that's going to give you the full deep dive on behavior-specific praise. If reading's not necessarily your jam, and I could definitely understand if that's the case, because gosh, you guys are busy, and you prefer to kick back and listen to something that's a little bit more multimedia based, more like a podcast or a movie. We had something that's called an interactive resource that's going to be the same content from that book, but you can kick back, have your favorite beverage and a snack and watch this interactive resource and get all the same information. You'll have access to all the same infographics and videos, but it comes in a nicely packaged sort of video based format that you can just kind of kick back and watch. Those are available to you. And they cover the full breadth of behavior-specific praise, including all the things I mentioned and all those really nice infographics that we just showed a moment ago as well. So let's see here. I have just a few minutes left. And what I want to do is to switch over. And I believe you can still see my screen. Can you guys see the website right now? Okay, I see some thumbs up. All right, cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you on our Project Enhance website how you could access this module and what it would look like for you as a user. So basically, just come and take a tour with me, and then in the next breakout session, you'll actually have the opportunity to access this yourself. So what you would want to do is go to ci3t.org. And I know, Eric, you're our pro at dropping links in the chat. So if you could support me with this, that would be wonderful. You'll go to ci3t.org and go to the Enhance tab that's called Project Enhance. And then Eric's going to put the password to this in the chat, just in case you don't have it already. The password is Enhance CI3T ! No caps. It's going to take you through to this page. And I just want to reiterate, this is something that you all have access to because you work at a school that is part of Project Enhance. You can use anything on this page. You can share anything on this page with anyone at your school. But we do please ask that you keep this under wraps and not shared out like on social media or with colleagues outside of your school or district, because right now this is part of a research project and we're trying to control who has access as we're still testing these materials. So we do appreciate you not sharing these outside of your school, but please, please, please do share these with your colleagues. We want anybody and everybody at your school to use these resources. So as you scroll down, you will find these cards, and each card here has a module, and you would not believe how much content is in each of these modules. It's a really wonderful collection. I would say like a trove of resources that you can use. But specifically, we're interested in the low intensity teacher delivered strategies for tonight. They are the purple cards right here. And we're going to start with behavior specific praise. When I click that card, it's going to take me to this little thing that says, please enter your school district email address to continue. If you have accessed the Project Enhance module this year already, when you put your email in here, it's going to take you straight to the module. If this is your first time accessing a module this year, just be aware it's going to take you through a process that'll take you about maybe 2 minutes, where it's going to ask you for your email address several times. Yes, we know that's kind of annoying, but we want to make sure that we get the right email address added to our list of people who have permission to access the modules. It's going to show you a quick informational letter that's about how these resources have been developed and some of the information about how some of the backend data will be used by our research team. And then once you finish that little process, it's going to add your email address that you give this quick little survey to a list of people who can access the modules. It takes maybe 2 or 3 minutes for that email address to actually be added. So we do ask you, as you try to access a module and it's like, I already did this. Why is it trying to make me go through it again? Don't go through the whole process again. Just give it a few minutes, and usually 2 or 3 minutes, sometimes up to 10 minutes, you'll have permission to access this module. So once that goes through, I'm going to type my email address in here. Here we go. I'm going to click the blue button. It's going to take me straight through to that module. And this should look pretty familiar from what we've looked at in the PowerPoint. The gist of it is, on the left here, you have a toolbar that'll let you skip through the book, and you can kind of see what the different sections are called. These are kind of just like little mini chapters where you can click through the content. Oh. It's going to just talk you through all the what is it, why is it important, all that kind of stuff. Also, the overview here is a really helpful place where you can actually find sort of a table of contents for all the resources that are available to you. So if you wanted, for example, to share one of the infographics that we were looking at earlier about like what is behavior specific praise, you could just scroll down right here and you'd be able to find that infographic, and you can click this link button, and it's going to download that infographic to my computer, and you could share that out with anyone at your school that you might like to share this strategy with. All of the materials that are embedded in the module are here for you. And if you're interested in looking at the interactive resource that I mentioned, which is the more video-based module, or more video-based version of the module, you can click this page button, and it's going to open up. Well, maybe. Let's try that one more time. Here we go. And there we go. Yes, interactive resource, low intensity strategies, behavior specific praise. If you open that up, you'll find that it comes to a page that looks like this, and it's basically going to have voiceovers that will walk you through all that strategy and content in a really nice kind of multimedia based format. The last thing we do want to just represent here tonight is that each of these strategies comes with a PowerPoint that can be downloaded from the module that looks like this: PowerPoint, behavior-specific praise, tiered library strategy. If you are going to take this content back to your faculty and staff to share with them, you could download this PowerPoint. And basically what it's going to give you is a really quick overview of behavior-specific praise that you could share in a faculty and staff meeting, for example, that's going to talk through the content from this module. What is behavior-specific praise? What are some examples? Why is it effective? What does the research say? And even down to the implementation steps themselves. And if you wanted to share this content, you could prepare yourself to give a quick little 10 or 15-minute presentation on behavior-specific praise by reading through the ebook, because basically all that information from the PowerPoint lines up to the information in the book. So if you're sort of in that role where you're taking back content from tonight, that would be a really great way to share this information with your colleagues.
And one of the things we visited about in one of the rooms is like when you get your treatment integrity and social validity reports back very soon, you might recall that your district sends those surveys out and they will summarize for you everything. They'll aggregate it and put the information, and you might actually go through and look at your, like the data on what teachers are telling you about, here's what my rate, here's how I'm using behavior specific praise. And if you notice that that may be lower than what you want, or maybe it's lower in terms of how the tickets are paired with it, that would be a great opportunity to say, we notice this is one place we want to focus on. So you can set a SMART goal, something that is, specific, measurable, and actionable. And then you can connect them with these resources. So you might say, this is something that we're going to focus on, and you can send them to the website, or you can attach like an infographic or that little short video, or you can say however you want to access it, but we'd love for you to check this out, and you can make that a focal point. So I love the conversations about how practical. The next strategy that we're going to focus on tonight is instructional choice. And fortunately, we get to be having this time with you for the next 2 years. And so next year, just so that you're aware, if you come to the same topic next year, we'll feature another 2. You don't have to do every single strategy every single year. You might want to have focal points, or you might want to start off like with behavior specific praises for all the reasons that Mark mentioned. This year, we're focusing on these 2 because sometimes people, for sure, we want everybody to know how to do behavior specific praise because that's the linchpin for shaping, all future behavior. We also focus on instructional choice because for some people, their comfort zone is in the academic domain. So we want to show how you can weave these in, and it's not separate from instruction, but it's literally part of it. And as we've mentioned, these same strategies apply for non-instructional areas and with families. So if you have found this card now, so if you're on that same page for Enhance, if you were to click on the instructional choice card, and this is actually the first one that we made, so you're going to already start to see there's a few differences from the behavior specific praise one because we're listening and learning from you. But if you were to click on that and open this up, you're going to find things that are very predictable across this. And Paloma Perez-Clark, who is doing a beautiful job of organizing this series for us, like she has done extensive work in her training and her final year of her doc program to also create these resources that are in this resource, as well as those that are on the COVID tab for families, and some of which are even translated into Spanish for families that are not accessing information in English. But if you will find some people that gravitate towards things like the infographics or like the video, so those might be predictable structures for people. But just like what Mark walked through with you with behavior specific praise, this is going to give you a really clear definition of what instructional choice is. And in its most brief form, it is truly allowing kids an independent opportunity to pick between 2 or more options. And this is important. It is not a group choice. It's not like, hey, class, let's vote on which one we're going to do. Because if you did that, then the kid that didn't vote for the one that got picked, they didn't get choice. So this is an independent choice. And the nice thing is that as similar to behavior specific praise, it is ideally incorporated as part of tier 1 practices. It can be used as a standalone tier 2. So it might be like have it in classrooms that they support, where the teacher does it as a regular practice, but they might collect data to see how is that influencing the engagement of 2 kids that show up as having higher than average internalizing issues. Like, is this enough to get them involved in the conversation? And it also can be woven into other pieces of other types of interventions. And when you look at the steps, and we'll show you some other resources in a moment, But mostly what teachers are going to want to know very quickly is tell me what it is and exactly how to do it. And you're going to want that other information behind it, like the practicalities, the benefits, the pitfalls, things to be aware of. But this is what they're going to want to know. And sometimes people will differentiate between things that are called within task choices and across task choices. Within task choices basically means that kids are doing the same thing at the same time, but there is a slight variation. So like for little kids, it might be they're going to do this activities and the choice might be crayons or sparkling markers, or maybe it's a math assignment. Would you like to do evens or odds? Would you like to listen to this book on tape with headphones, or would you like to read it just without headphones? But basically kids are doing the same thing. And then it also can be across task choices. And what that would look like when you're walking into a classroom, you might see one kid making a diorama to show like the Oregon Trail, and another kid might be making a PowerPoint video to explain it. Another kid might be doing a short little research report, but it could look like different things at different classroom times. And so different people are going to have different degrees of comfort of that. And some of the tips of the trade are really thinking through what are you comfortable with in terms of offering, in terms of those choices, because you're still the instructional leader. And so the first thing here is creating a menu of what you yourself are comfortable for in terms of offering. For those of you who know me, I used to be a middle school teacher, 7th and 8th grade, and I taught special education as well as general education. I also taught at the elementary level. And I remember visiting one morning with somebody, we're out on noon duty supervision. She's like, oh my gosh, I am dreading today. And I'm like, what's wrong? And she had a halftime assignment as an administrator. So she was halftime kindergarten teacher in the morning and halftime administrator. She's like, I just don't like Tuesdays because I give kids a choice of painting. And this woman was like put together, dressed to the nines. And she's like, I just don't like paint days because I don't want to get it on my clothes and stuff. I'm like, you don't have to offer choice the choice of paint every Tuesday. And she's like, oh my God, I didn't even think of that. She's like, you're right. Like they have to paint at some point in their life, for God's sakes, they're in kindergarten, but it doesn't have to be every day. So when you're thinking about choices, you are in control of the choices. And the choice is not, do you feel like working today? So it's still related to your instructional objective. The second thing is once that menu is built, and then when a teacher is mapping out their lessons, they've got that as a reference point. And then you decide when to weave in those choices. And so it might be, like we mentioned a few moments ago, that it could be a choice of an instructional activity. It might be that during the independent seat part, I can listen to clean music with my headphones, or I could have no background noise, or I might be able to slip off my shoes and just have socks feet when I'm doing this independent activity. Or I might be able to talk with the shoulder partner, or I can choose to do this independently. So you are going to decide what those choices are. And then we just have to be clear on what those choices are. And when they are built into the lesson, we have to offer the choice. So once it's decided and it's communicated, we need clarity in what that is, and then ask the kid to make their choice. And I will say, we really need to think carefully about whether we want them to have a choice. So my kids, as you know, are older. My daughter is 23. My son is 20, turns 27 in January. And when they were little kids, we used to have this routine where we used to eat out once a week. And so it went from youngest to oldest, that the first weekend of the month, the youngest kid, which was Katie, she got to pick the choice of where to eat. And of course, we ate there together. The next time it was Nathan, then it was me, and then it was Craig. And I appreciate my husband choosing to be 2 years older than I am. Anyway, because I got my choice first. But I remember one time we were out for a family trip to Chicago to visit some of my husband's family. And I can generally count on Nathan to pick food that I like, because he and I both like things like salad bar, sushi, that kind of thing. And Katie and Craig are like meat, 3 potatoes, like big chunks of meat kind of a thing. And we're in Chicago. And so I said, Nathan, good news, like you get to choose the restaurant that we're going to eat. And so I said to him, there's that salad bar place that's got, that long line of things. There's a sushi place where they hand roll it. And then there's Gino's Pizza, which is a famous pizza place. And I should mention, I don't like cheese and I don't really care for bread. And so what does he pick? Open up the chat right now. 3 choices are salad bar, sushi, or Gino's Pizza. What does Nathan pick? This is exactly what happened. You're seeing it blow up in the chat. So he's like, yeah. And so I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, Gino's Pizza. Now, remember, the salad bar had like the soft serve ice cream at the end of it and all the crunchy toppings, the great croutons. Remember, it had the little swabby things. And then remember, at the sushi place, they also had those the mochi ice creams. And I must have revisited the benefits of those two other places multiple times, until which point he turned around and said, Mom, is this one of those times where we say there's a choice, but there's not really a choice? And we refer to that in our family as the Gino's pizza choice, because I offered him 3, but I really didn't want him to pick that one. So I should not have offered it. Long story short, we did eat at Gino's Pizza. And I definitely had the gluten-free, non-gluten-free cheese baby by the end of the meal. But nonetheless, it's always a good reminder to me when I think about teaching choice is that you decide what it is. But once you've offered it, don't try to sway their opinion. And then we're going to give them enough wait time to make that decision. And then we need to listen to it and follow through. And the wait time thing in that strategy can be somewhat tricky because some decisions are going to require a larger block of time than others. If you are giving a child a choice of the book to read for the semester, like a middle school kid that's going to get to choose like an assignment, or somebody in an AP class, it's a big decision. It's very different than evens or odds or working with a shoulder partner or silently. So you have to think about what's the right amount of time to give them, but we don't want to give them so much time that they lose the opportunity to accomplish the task during that assignment that's given. So sometimes we are going to need to prompt kids, and it can be as simple as this. It might be you pass out choices for people, and most kids are making their choice, and you might go to one child and say, I know you haven't picked yet, so I'm going to leave these 2 right here. And this one is this option for a writing assignment. And this is another one. I'm going to leave these on your desk, and I'll be back in just 60 seconds. So think about which one you want, and I'll grab the one that you don't. And then you give them a second, walk away, and they say, what did you decide? And then you pull the one that they didn't want and let them go. Because what you don't want to do for the child that's struggling with indecision is you leave both options. They start this one, then they change their mind. So they start this one, then they erase that one. So sometimes we have to do a little bit of scaffolding to help them to select from the choices that are available and get started. Another important thing in this step is making sure that you want to acknowledge them for making a choice, but please avoid saying, I knew you would make that choice, or that's the one I thought you'd pick, or that's the right one. Because we don't want to leave kids thinking that there is a right choice. The benefit of having choice is that you get a chance to practice decision making and have some agency and know that I can make choices that influence what I get to do. We don't want them trying to guess something to please us. We want them to have a range of possibilities. And it might be that some kids consistently have, pick always the same thing. They always pick a partner assignment, or they always pick typing rather than handwriting. And so you might say something when it comes to choices for the class, you might go to somebody and say, Glenna, you have done such a beautiful job on this computer. And today I would love for you to, consider either doing this with handwriting or printing, but I'd love to see you use this pencil today because I want to see how your handwriting's looking. So I can still give choice, but it can be a little bit more focused. And then finally, get input back. We had a wonderful teacher that we worked with in Ohio, and she did this strategy in one of her writing blocks with kids. And she did the choices for everybody during writing instruction, but wanted to see specifically how 2 kids that were at moderate risk were doing with the benefit of this extra choice to see, did it indeed increase their engagement and limit disruption? And she did ask the entire class for input on what they thought about choices. And a couple of the kids said it was hard because they weren't used to having choices. And if that comes up, that means we need more time to practice, because we know that choice making is a foundational skill for building kids' self-determined behaviors. So other resources that you're going to find in that module is going to be things like the details of how to make the menu, if you want to build your bank of across activities or within choice activities. And we have some examples in there in the narrative of things that we've learned along the way. I remember when I was a classroom teacher giving kids the option of how to show what you know about the solar system. And for any of you who've ever taught science, I did not think that through. I said they could do it however they want. It could be a shoebox, it could be styrofoams, it could be a video. And I made the mistake of having every one of those due when I was a middle school teacher on the same day on Friday. And so my classroom looked like, it's like solar system everywhere. It was a great learning experience. And so what I learned the next year is choose your own due date. So instead of everything coming in on Friday, kids could choose how they were going to build their solar system to show what they know, and they could choose their own due date. And I did it that way. Instead, it was 5 people brought it in on Monday, another 5 brought it on Tuesday. So then it was come, show us what you learned. I graded them during lunchtime, and then they went home. And that way kids got to see it. And it was interesting because you're going to have some kids that are going to be early adopters, and that's wonderful. And so they have an opportunity to showcase the kids that might need a few more exemplars at the beginning of the week. So those are some of the things that you can read about in that module. We also want to emphasize that we would love for kids to have the opportunity to practice decision-making and choice-making in other places. And some of us have very strong-willed children in our home setting, and we still want to foster those self-determined behaviors. So you may not give all your kids like free choice on what to wear to school, but you might do things like lay out 2 outfits and say, which would you like to wear tomorrow? And so we just want to make sure that kids are getting those little ideas along the way. And if you notice, it's the same types of steps that are broken down so that parents are making those steps, determining what they're comfortable with. And when we talk about it as a tier 2 support, if right now, if you have your CI3T implementation manual open, if you would scroll all the way to the bottom, so you already have that listing of tier 2 and tier 3 supports in your plans, you might see this listed. And when we talk about it as a tier 2, you can still deliver the choices to everybody, but you want to see like, how well is that working? Because just like when Mark was saying, sometimes the simplest thing, like a higher rate of behavior specific praise or more intentional use of choices for specific kids, that's enough. There are literally studies that have been done that showing just offering kids the choice of which of these things do you want to do first, that in and of itself is enough to support kids that really have some challenging behaviors to become more engaged in schools. So you can do this and then monitor, like, how is that happening in the class? How is it working for that child, and get their input on it. And some kids, like we said, may find that it's harder. And this is something that can be done from elementary to middle and to high. And if you think about it, even choice in like our workday on terms of what we prep, and even for very little kids, it can be, today we are going to write a 2-sentence story. We are going to draw a picture, and then we're going to make a recording of us reading our story. And you can choose to either draw your picture first or write your words first, but we're going to have those 2 things done before we make our video. It's just threading the needle to let kids have that opportunity to choose. And if you would, if you are back on that website now, I'd love for you to go make sure that we have clarity. And I know we've done some little scaffolding for you to have a little bit of an opportunity to practice finding these. But if you would, go ahead and open up your website, go back to that page. I have like 90,000 documents open on my screen. So I'm going to go to our website, ci3t.org. And when you get there, I'm going to again have you click on the enhance. And you're going to look for these. And I look for the girl with the purple shirt that does the overview. I'm going to find the one with instructional choice. And as Mark mentioned, yes, it can feel like a pain in the pants needing to type your email in, but this is how we're determining access. So we encourage you try to not bypass that, because this is what's allowing us to keep track of who's accessing what. And when you look at this little 0 through 12 progression is like the month, they're representing the month before the school year begins. And then the rest, it represents the months across the academic year. And you might decide, like, for example, that instructional choice might be the one that you decide to do in month 4 or in month 3. And as you click through these pages, this is the one that I would encourage you to find. And just as Mark was showing you these things, I think about these as like Lucky Charms. You know, the cereal Lucky Charms, you know, it has all the oats and then it has all those bright colored marshmallows. I think of these like the marshmallows and the Lucky Charms. Like, all the content is parallel and it shows up in different ways. But if you yourself wanted to go back, she could also, if she wanted to, just simply download this updated one. And when she pulls it up, if you wanted to, you yourself go do a professional learning for somebody on instructional choice, we have distilled and updated that into this little tiny PowerPoint. And if you wanted to, you could have this set as a 10-minute professional learning. It could be a 20-minute thing. It could be a breakout at a professional learning day, but it goes through all the big blocks of what is the choice? Why is it effective? What's the supporting research? And this might look very familiar to you, right? Because it's pulling it back all together and distilling it. So that infographic that Mark and I just walked through with you to explain behavior specific praise and explain instructional choice, all those things that we just said out loud are in the ebook. are in that interactive resource, and they're in these downloadable and editable PowerPoints, so that if you wanted to go disseminate this, or I heard Eric Common talking about in one of his breakout rooms about identifying on-site coaches, you have these resources there. You could also quickly go grab this one-page document that says, show me the evidence behind this, because inevitably somebody's going to say, I heard choice is bad, or choice takes away from instruction. We want them to know that here's the evidence as to the why. And we also want to be transparent about like where the potential pitfalls are, so that you can like think about like the mistakes that can get made, like the one that I did where I had everything coming in on the same day, didn't really think that through. But when you look at these steps remain the same. So if you were to pick this up, or the infographic, or any of those, you're going to have that dedicated alignment, so that you yourself can use your own talking points and go through and share this. Also, I want to make sure that you know that in these, if you are somebody that wants to go do this choice intervention, like if Michelle wanted to go do this in her classroom, she could go download this one page that lists out those 9 steps. And then she would also have all the tools that she needed, because when everybody says collect data, see how it goes, it has to be practical. So you might see this very simple treatment integrity sheet, so that if I'm doing this with one kid, so like if Alicia is my teacher and I am her student, she might fill this out for me, like, how did I do giving Kathleen instructional choices on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday? So this is how she can keep track of, was I able to do all those steps to make sure that this intervention was given to Kathleen as planned? And you can also get input even before you start. Like if maybe somebody like me that is coaching somebody in her district to say, hey, I want to teach you what this could look like. Or maybe Debbie is doing that with one of the 13 people that's here from her school tonight. Go to you for being here. It might be to say, like, what do you guys think about this as a strategy? And if you notice that some of the social validity ratings from teachers, if they're a little bit lower, we want to talk to them first to see, like, what are you worried about? Like, what is the concern? Like, what procedure feels uncomfortable? Because you want to hear about that in the beginning. And there's also forms, like, so that you can find out from the kid perspective as well, to see what they think. But like if a teacher says up front, like, I'm a little bit worried about how this is going to feel if kids are all doing different things at different times, because in the beginning it can feel a little chaotic, then you might say, all right, then let's just focus on within task choices for this first go around. Then you've heard them, you've responded, and you've tailored the intervention. So in this, you'll find the guidance that you need to move forward. So I'm going to set that aside, and I'm going to come back to our presentation. We've given you 2 very practical ones for tonight. And in this next conversation, we are going to ask you to keep in mind, like, the way have innovated within their district, and they're building on like the shoulders of giants. It's the same thing. And I love how people are building familiarity and fluency, and back to the days when we were like in the alumni center, the stand and deliver and click. And it's so exciting to see what you've come up with. So as you head into this next talk time, we are hoping you would have this conversation to think about, how might you yourself use this in a classroom? Like, go and do it. Like, what would that look like to set it up to see how it works for a child? Or how might you share a strategy, knowing that many of you are already doing these amazing things about, incorporating choices, and such great use of choices. And I want to thank other people that felt comfortable sharing in their breakout rooms of how they're embedding it. And you are right on the money, like using those strategies to offer kids choices. It is a core piece of how we actually build kids' intrinsic motivation. And it's a core piece of how we build their self-determined behaviors. And by creating that range of opportunity, whether it's scaffolded or more so, and sometimes you can even involve kids in helping them let you put together the menu of choices. And I know some people like tonight that are here, like in dual role, she's going to have the opportunity to take these strategies into secondary schools. And again, these work from all kinds of ranges, and there's guidance in terms of developmental considerations, but kids can definitely be a part of this equation. So thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. So just for this last section, we're going to talk through, now that you sort of had a chance to look at individual low intensity supports. We talked about behavior specific praise. We talked about instructional choice. We want to kind of take it to the next level and propose an idea that was referenced a little bit earlier in the presentation about a structure that we can use to make sure that these low intensity strategies are woven into daily instruction in a very intentional and mindful manner. This idea is called integrated lesson planning. I think many of you have seen this before, but if you haven't seen it before, the gist of it is when we have teachers planning lessons, by no means are we suggesting that they need to script out or write a complicated lesson plan for everything they're doing for students, but they need a framework for thinking about, okay, what's the flow of this lesson going to be? What are the materials I need? What are the learning intentions that I want to target? And one of the things that we're really encouraging people to start doing is traditionally, we always think about academic objectives. A lot of people use like I can statements that you have students say, I can do this, this, and this after the conclusion of this lesson. What we want people to start thinking about is how can we add in behavioral and social and emotional objectives or learning statements or learning intentions into lessons so that we're constantly bringing in the school-wide expectations, the lessons and skills taught as part of your social and emotional well-being curriculum, like Second Step or Positive Action, and constantly putting those objectives and that vocabulary back in front of students so that we're basically handing to them on a silver platter, like, here's the stuff we've been teaching. Here's how it's applicable, not just in the context of the lesson we talked about this morning in our Second Step lesson, but also right now during our academic instruction. You can use your self-regulation strategies or your social skills to make this learning more impactful for you, to make our classroom a more positive place, to make better relationships with your peers. So using those learning intentions in an integrated fashion that's encompassing academics, behavioral, and social and emotional well-being is a huge piece of what integrated lesson planning is all about. It's very simple because it's just something we're doing to frame the lessons, but potentially a very powerful way that's going to help us as educators continue to weave that content and vocabulary into instruction. The other thing we want to think about is how to use these 7 low intensity supports, of which behavior specific praise and instructional choice are 2, in throughout the lesson. And the idea here is that using each low intensity support by itself is great. These are effective practices. These are likely to produce meaningful shifts for your students when used in that fashion. But where you really take things to the next level is when you start to mix and match and use these things in combination with each other to just make them part of the natural classroom environment, because they're being used so frequently and so naturalistically that you almost don't even, they sort of fade into the background, but they basically provide the foundation for the classroom environment. And you can start thinking about how some of these things play so nicely together. So just take, for example, the example I was talking about this morning. You have a teacher transitioning from one lesson to the next. She gives her learning intentions. She gives the expectations for what students need in terms of materials. And then she's using pre-correction to say, remember, the expectation is to be responsible by getting out your materials and worrying about yourself during this transition. Then she's using active supervision to move throughout the classroom, interacting positively with students, monitoring what they're doing, making her presence felt in every single corner of the classroom, just moving throughout that space, using behavior-specific praise to narrate exactly what students are doing to meet expectations, and very slyly, very strategically, those behavior-specific praise prompts or praise statements acting as prompts for students that aren't quite meeting expectations yet, because those kids' eyes are going exactly to where the teacher is directing their attention, and they then have a model for exactly what to do. And they know that the best way to get positive attention is by following expectations, not by engaging in acting out behavior. So powerful. Then using active responding or opportunities to respond throughout the lesson. You can do things like have choral responding or response cards so that kids can have an opportunity to engage, not just in raise my hand and one kid can answer one question at a time, but like allow everybody to answer every question by having those response cards. By weaving these things into instruction in this way, we basically make our classroom optimally suited to support all students' learning. And we're going to make it more likely that kids that have tier 2 or tier 3 needs, that their needs can be met in that inclusive environment as well. So this integrated lesson plan is a really powerful prompt for us to think about how we provide instruction, and just a really quick reminder of the tools in our toolkit, because it's so easy to forget all those great strategies that we have at our disposal, unless we have some way to prompt us. And that's kind of what the purpose of this document is. So, okay, that was long. So what we're going to kind of pose as we're wrapping up here today is that you might start asking yourself as a reflection, what's an additional strategy that you might like to explore? Or possibly what's a strategy you would like to share with a colleague in your school, in your building, in your professional learning community? And thinking about how you can leverage these resources that we looked at today on our Project Enhanced site to share this content with your staff. So some ideas might be you could bring back some of these strategies with those PowerPoint slides to do just a 10-minute information sharing session in a faculty and staff meeting. You could take this content to your professional learning community and say, hey, look at these cool resources that I saw at the Project Empower session last night. You can check these out too. Here's what was useful and cool and helpful for me. You could do a little book study where you have PLCs getting together to discuss this content. Or probably my favorite idea here is developing on-site coaches, which is literally a document that's going to list, like, if I need help with instructional choice, here's who I can go and see, and here's a classroom that I could go and observe in to get a sense for what that would look like in my classroom. All really good ideas. So as you're thinking about how you could use some of these concepts and share project enhanced materials with your staff, we do just want to remind you, let's see if I can pull the website up one more time. On that enhance tab, you have access to all of these materials, which you can, and we definitely encourage you to share with your colleagues. And some ideas that you could use. Of course, you have these purple modules that are going to cover the low intensity supports. Those are great nuggets to share with people to get them started. If you're kind of needing to take a step back before you even share specific strategies, maybe for colleagues that are brand new to your school and saying, like, I don't even know what CI3T is, much less what a low intensity support is. Like, what are you talking about? A great place for people to start is this module that's called Tier 1 Practical Strategies for Preventing and Responding to Challenging Behavior. This module kind of just explains, like, really briefly, what's CI3T, what does Tier 1 consist of, and also, like, how are those proactive and reactive components working together to support students? Because there is a misconception that CI3T is only about positive reinforcement, and we don't ever do anything when problem behaviors occur. We just go on about our lives like everything is fine and dandy. That's not true. We have a procedure for responding to challenging behavior. We have reactive plans that specify exactly what I should do as a teacher when a student acts out in my classroom, what potential disciplinary actions might occur, what we're going to do to support that student in the future. All of that information is in your CI3T plan, and it's really helpful to make sure that everyone understands that we do have both proactive strategies like our low intensity supports, as well as reactive supports as well. And then if you're looking to go deeper into those low intensity supports, we showed you behavior specific praise tonight. We showed you instructional choice. We've got opportunities to respond available as well. I believe pre-correction is going to be coming very, very soon. So that should be up, I'm pretty sure, within the next week, if not sooner. And then we've got active supervision on the way, I think is going to be coming up very soon as well. And I think the hope, and Kathleen, if I'm getting this wrong, please correct me, is that in the next several months, we'll have all 7 of the strategies available and on the website.
That's right. They'll all be there by March 1st. And they're tagging out one month at a time.
Perfect. And if by chance you're saying, okay, that's great, but I desperately need instructional feedback right now, you do have an option available to you. In that case, you can go to the professional learning tab of our website, where you'll find all the traditional materials. So we have our enhanced stuff, which is our brand new fancy, it's our Porsche, Mercedes, Tesla, whatever. If you're looking for very serviceable, good materials that are just a little bit in a older format, everything is still available to you here. So you could find that instructional feedback resource if you really need it. That's there for you. And then also just a quick little heads up that we do have some additional resources available to you. For example, if you are enjoying your experience at tonight's Empower session, all the past sessions will be posted with videos that will be up very shortly. So you could go back and watch the previous sessions, or use those as like a webinar format to share with your colleagues at your school. They're just posted to YouTube. You'll be able to find the links in this accordion, and they'll take you to basically kind of a cut up version of a session. So you can have those videos as sort of a resource to fall back on if you need that as well. Okay, so I'm going to close us out. See if I can get back to my PowerPoint here. Okay, so to wrap us up, tonight was session 3 on low intensity supports. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here. We know that your time is precious, especially your time in the evenings. So we really appreciate your dedication to come and get this content, and we hope that it was worth your time and that you'll share the information that you learned back with your colleagues. We have a session coming up in January on Tier 2 strategies, where we'll be sharing more enhancing CI3T modules content, and then another session on Tier 3 in March. where we're going to feature some really exciting materials on things like managing acting out behavior at tier 3, which is we're going to show you how to build individualized de-escalation plans. One of the groups was looking at that earlier. It's a great kind of advanced module to show people how, for those kids that have really elevated behaviors, how we can create individualized plans in collaboration with multiple people at school, with students, with their families, to make sure that students are fully supported. So if you're interested in any of those sessions, please do sign up for those. One of my colleagues will make sure that you've got the link in the chat for the flyer where you can sign up for future sessions. We'd love to have you here. We'd love for you to invite your colleagues. Anybody at your school is welcome to come to these sessions. So we would love to have you attend with us. So as you're kind of thinking about your CI3T model and all the work that you're doing, of course, an emphasis is for just ongoing professional development for you all as faculty and staff members, and for leadership team members at your school, to make sure that you've got everything you need to be successful. So these professional learning materials, we hope, is a great starting point for you to gain the knowledge and skills that you'll want to support students across the tiers. And particularly digging into some of those resources that we talked about tonight in terms of low intensity strategies. We've got modules on tier 2 interventions and tier 3 interventions, which are the topics of those future Empower sessions. So if you want to learn about an intervention like direct behavior rating, which is a really cool intervention and progress monitoring tool for behavior, check out that tier 2 session. We think that's going to be a really good one. And then, of course, we do have modules if you're interested more in, like, what does it look like to be a CI3T leader in your school? Maybe you're already a CI3T leadership team member. Maybe you're somebody that's new at your school that's like, hey, this is pretty cool. I want to take more of a leadership role in this work. We've got modules on that topic as well. These are sort of these blue themed modules. Definitely, we are welcome to check those out as well. And then, of course, to focus on tier 1, as always, those modules are a great starting point for new folks at your school to kind of get started with CI3T implementation. And lastly, if you're interested in interacting with us more, we've got these Empower sessions. We also have our trainers and coaches calls. These are accessible on the professional learning tab of our website. If you ever have like just little implementation problems or questions, or you're like, hey, I'm trying to get this data tool to work and I can't get the formatting to cooperate with me, or like, hey, I'm a little bit confused about how to upload my tier 2 intervention grid into these drop-down menus in my tier 2 tracker. Like, what do I do? Take those questions to these coaches calls because they're a great place to do some direct Q&A with us, and we'll provide any coaching and support that you might need. If you're curious about how to sign up for these, this is the tab that you can go to do that, but you can also reach out to us via email or in the chat tonight, and we'll get you hooked up with those registration links. So just in wrapping up, we are offering quite a bit of professional learning throughout the course of this year. These are our Empower sessions, which are open to faculty and staff. And as I mentioned, this was session 3. We've got 3 more to go this year, and we just would love to have you come back for future sessions with us. So check out session 4 on tier 2 coming up in January. And as always, we really encourage you to take back the lessons that you learned tonight to your colleagues and share that back. We not only are okay with you sharing these materials, we would really encourage you to do so, and would really love your efforts to get these in the hands of as many folks as possible. So of course, that Enhance tab is available to you at ci3t.org/enhance with the password enhance ci3t ! And just feel free to share that out with folks at your building as you like. And just, yeah, we really appreciate your time and effort, and we hope that you have a wonderful evening. Let me stop sharing so I can actually see everybody. Kathleen, did you want to say anything else before we send?
I just wanted to thank you one more time for being here. And I know we will see you, some of you, at the Kansas session on December 7th, and the rest of you, we will not see you until after the holidays. So I just wanted to express our deep appreciation. I personally feel like the greatest gift we can give each other is time together. And thank you so much for coming and just the rich conversations. I appreciate your commitment to your kids. And I want to thank everybody who's here from our team and from yours teams. And just thank you very much for your gifts. We hope you have a safe and happy holiday season. And I know, I hope you get time to spend with people that you love. And I know a lot of us have lost people that we do. And I hope you will be comforted by very wonderful memories during this holiday season. So we will look forward to seeing you next time, and some of you in December. So thank you, Mark, for co-presenting, and thanks for the wonderful coaching, friends. Take care.